Hi everyone, Daljit here from astrolab21.com. And it's been a minute since we've done an actual astrology video on this channel. As many of you know, I've kind of launched a channel within the channel here, something I'm calling Mutable Fire. And it gives me a chance to share some of the information and insights on some of the other things that I study and practice outside of astrology, or sort of in tandem to my astrology practice. One of those being the human design system. So I just recently completed a 8-part intro series on human design, which is here on YouTube. And if you go to my YouTube channel, to my playlist, you'll see the intro to human design system. 8 videos, sort of the intro, kind of will give you a good basis on everything you need to know about human design from it, especially coming to it from astrology, as many of you may be. If you've ever been interested in it, this is the perfect series. I kind of custom built this for those of us who have been studying astrology but really are curious about this system. And I will say they, I think, dovetail quite nicely. I'm finding the synthesis of these two systems is really, really powerful. So check that out if you're interested. And sort of tangentially, I've also started offering some new readings in addition to the traditional astrology readings that I've been doing for many, many years. I've added some human design readings to my repertoire. So you can go to astrolab21.com and check out those. I've got 4 different readings I'm doing right now. There's a human design foundation reading. There's an Astro HD reading, which is combines your astrology and human design. I really enjoy doing that one. I've done, about a dozen of them in the last month, and really, really interesting. The clients are really getting a lot out of them. I'm finding it really helpful to move between 2 systems and really get a good, really good guidance on, anything you're looking to get guidance on in life. So also, these are deeply discounted right now. I'm kind of doing this promotion to just let people know that I'm doing this now. The foundation reading is only $88, and the Astro HD is only $111. Normally these are going to go back up to about $250, $300, which is the normal price for my readings. So pretty deeply discounted, about a third of the price here. If you're interested in doing that, I'll probably keep this promotion up for another month or so. Maybe in September, I'm probably going to move them back up to the normal rate. So great opportunity. If you've wanted to try that, check it out. Please do. I would love to do a reading with you out there. Been getting to meet a lot of people from the channel and share and do readings with them. And it's been really, really amazing. So the other thing is that if you're still interested in astrology, I still do all of my monthly articles on medium.com, even though I'm not doing videos as frequently on astrology. I do still do the articles. So if you're a member of Medium, you can find me there. Astrolab21 is my publication there. If you're not a member and you want to have access, I usually will post a free friends link to each article on my Facebook page at Astrolab21 as well. So, all right, there's the housekeeping anyway. Let's jump into the business at hand and why I wanted to do this video. Because as I said, there's a major configuration coming up in the sky, and it involves Saturn and Jupiter. So I'm titling this video, War and Peace in the Global Village. And I'm borrowing that tagline from the famous media theorist Marshall McLuhan, who wrote a book of that title in the 60s. Very prescient. And I feel it bodes well, or bodes is a good word. It bodes well or ill for where we are in our current situation, war and peace in the global village. Because, as many of you realize, it's bonkers out there in the world, isn't it? We've got a lot of shit going on here in America, over in Europe, the Middle East. A lot of tension around the world, and a lot of people are very, very, very concerned, and I think for good reason. So hopefully we can use this tool of astrology to give us a perspective. As always, we can get like a big picture, step outside of the situation and see what are these archetypal themes, these energetic patterns, these cycles that we're living in. How are they playing out? How can we access that energy in these patterns and use them to our own best practices, best use? How do we as individuals function in this complex society that we're in? As I always say, right? It's, think global, think local, act global kind of thing. Act local, think global. I always get that backed up, right? But, essentially what we do as individuals has an effect on the overall collective. One person at a time can change the mood, change the attitude, change the direction, change the momentum, change the energy field. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at this pretty big cycle. And it's interesting because this is a cycle that began in many ways 4 years ago. And in 2020, we had what we called the Great Mutation or the Great Conjunction. Right? This is every 20 years, Saturn and Jupiter are conjunct, and they start a new cycle, right? What we call the synodic cycle. So these two planets as they dance together around the zodiac. And the Saturn-Jupiter one is a pretty significant one. It is the two social planets, and it tends to really set the rhythm for advancements in society, these big moves that we see, a pendulum swinging back and forth, typically from left to right and progressive and conservative. It really does set a rhythm to society in many ways. And of course, it affects us all as individuals too. So we're going to look at that. And I thought, we'll start with, I'll show you the chart here. I'll bring that back up. Here I've got the chart up for August 14th. So the middle of next week, it's a pretty big, significant transit. And it's, as I said, as astrologers, we usually look at a year in advance. So in December, I'll look for, the year to come. And when I looked at 2024, this was one of those periods that I thought, oh, this is a pretty significant one. Obviously, we had the eclipse back in April. That was a big deal. And we're still in it. We're in the midst of that eclipse season, right? We'll get the resolution to that coming up in Libra season in another month and a half or so. So that's a big deal. We have another one coming up, unfortunately, right during the U.S. presidential election in early November here. I wish it weren't the case, but it just is. This is the astrology syncing up with society, and so we'll probably have another video coming up about that. But this one is significant. As I said, it involves Saturn and Jupiter, and they are in a square aspect. So we've got Saturn over here in Pisces, and the reason I drew this up for this time, 11:05 on August 14th, is because it's an exact conjunction of Mars and Jupiter. So it's kind of the triggering event, if you will, of this configuration. We've had this Saturn, Jupiter coming into this square, this first quarter square, for the last week or so, maybe 2 weeks, 5-degree orb or so. But this is a really interesting moment because it does involve this exact conjunction of Mars and Jupiter, and it brings in a square with Venus in Virgo and the Moon in Sagittarius. Right? So what this is what we would call a grand mutable square. Mars is squaring these guys, and we've got Jupiter and Mars squaring Venus, Venus squaring Mars. So you see, whenever you see this kind of big sort of box in the sky, this is a kind of configuration that, as an astrologer, you go, okay, especially considering the planets involved and the fact that this is a major point in this synodic cycle, as I said, between Saturn here and Jupiter here. So we'll take a look at that. I thought it'd be interesting as I was thinking about this. I pulled up a clip from a video I did in 2020 about this great mutation of Saturn and Jupiter. And it was actually one of the first handful of videos I did for the channel, as I started this in 2020. So I talked about the importance of that transit then, and I was saying how it would be sort of the first test of it would be today, 2024. So I thought it's about a 4-minute clip. I'm going to let that play, and it'll set the tone for how we're going to look at what's happening now, 4 years down the road. So let's just take a listen to that.
Aquarius is the patron saint of the rebel and the reformer and the innovator and the inventor and the iconoclast, right? So what we're going to see is a lot of these highly individualized type of people start to emerge and become sort of the leaders of the new. They're going to be the first out of the gates, and they're going to trailblaze with new ideas and new visions of what the future should be. So beginning over this next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see this real groundswell of support for these really visionary type of people who have the idea for what this new society should be, right? And that's what the grand conjunction energy of both Jupiter and Saturn is really being powerfully combined and promoting this new theme, this new tone that's trying to be set, right? We're trying to ring the bell of Aquarius, and it's a note that's going to reverberate for the next 20 years, for this entire cycle. And what's at heart here is this unique combination of the two planetary energies of Jupiter and Saturn, right? Which some ways may seem contradictory, because you have Jupiter, which is all about expansion and growth and faith and optimism. And this can sometimes seem like it's the polar opposite of Saturn, which is about contraction and can be pessimistic and fearful and insecure. But despite the seemingly different methods, both of these planets are actually working towards the same goal, which is that of building and maintaining a social order, right? So that's why they are considered the two social planets. And the tension between them, between expansion and contraction, right, between liberal and conservative, this is necessary. This is part of what society needs to function and to cohere and to, in fact, evolve. This tension of opposites holds it all together. So over the next year, what we're going to see is the faster moving planet, Jupiter, is going to start to separate from Saturn. And it's going to move through the entire sign of Aquarius throughout 2021. And its job is to sort of carry forward the optimism and the spirit and potential that this great conjunction represents, and begin to set the tone for the new era that's beginning. Meanwhile, the slower moving Saturn will take 2.5 years to move through Aquarius. And it moves behind, during which time it will demand typical Saturnian efforts of hard work and putting up structures and boundaries and limits that will contain this energy of innovation and the spirit that Jupiter has brought forth. It's going to force us to dynamically create tension so that something solid can be made of the new ideas, of the innovation, right? And this tension is going to go on for like 5 years, and it's going to reach a peak in 2024 when the planets then form a square, right? So Jupiter will have moved forward into Gemini, we'll have Saturn in Pisces, and when we get to that point, it's going to be this sort of gut check, right? This check-in about how are these new ideas being assimilated into the collective, right? And we'll likely have some sort of crisis of action. This is very typical of that stage of the cycle. And something will have to be worked out and worked through at that time.
All right, pretty interesting, right? Here we are now at that time 4 years later, as we looked at, in 2020. And I talk about it being a gut check and a crisis in action. It certainly feels like we are in that predictable portion of this cycle. So I thought, it'd be good to set the table. Also kind of interesting to see what's the water under the bridge in the last 4 years. I look a lot different. I had fewer gray hairs there for sure. A little more dapper in my wardrobe as well. Was in California. I'm completely across the country at this point. So a lot has changed, obviously, and as I said in that video, we've been witnessing these two planets now move through sort of a quarter of the sky. And so what's happened with, Saturn having moved through all Aquarius and now currently in Pisces, Jupiter all the way through Gemini, and now we're coming to this crisis moment. How have we done at building the structure of this new Aquarian sort of paradigm? And what is the challenges? Because this is where we're going to see the difficulties and the fault lines, if you will. So, one of the things that came to mind as I reviewed that, what was obvious to me, when we talk about the iconoclastic nature of Aries and these new sort of pioneers coming through, clearly the whole AI domain really fits this mold to a T, doesn't it? Like, I think of what's going on with OpenAI and all of these AI companies competing now, and the Sam Altmans of the world, the Elon Musks, and, they're all sort of the Aquarian iconoclastic types, right? This transhumanist, very Aquarian theme, right? That technology is going to save us. Something else I talked about in that video 4 years ago. And now we're, I think, amidst that, right? The other thing, obviously, that has, we were in the middle of COVID when this happened. We've come through that. And on the other side, now we're dealing with a war in Ukraine. We're dealing with war in the Middle East. We're dealing with a very contentious political campaign here in the United States. We've got political unrest in South America. We've got political unrest in Europe. A lot of migration issues are causing a lot of conflict across the continent there. So, as I said, a lot of challenges to our sense making at this time. It seems very scary, right? And of course, anything involving Saturn, it does involve fear, it does involve worry, and we're going to look at some of these themes that are coming up for us in this square so we can kind of understand how do we navigate through this energy? How do we keep ourselves intact, and how do we stay really aware and alert to what's happening in the world around us and get a sort of a better understanding of what's unfolding. So let's go and look at a few of these slides that I put together. And I've been playing with AI myself a little bit. I use Stable Diffusion, which is the open source one. Pretty fascinating, honestly. As I was contemplating what I would use as an image for this, sort of epic battle between these two planetary archetypes, in this rather compelling sort of topic, which it feels like, is it war or peace in the global village? Right now, when we look around, we're not seeing a ton of peace. We see a lot of war, a lot of strife, and this idea of these two planets kind of facing off at this point, which is kind of the energy of a square. And remember, I say it's crisis in action. So we're going to look at what's unfolding in this archetype, if you will. So one of the things that I always like to do is, whenever I'm looking at two planetary archetypes, and you've seen this, I've done this many times on the videos here, is to look at sort of the typical ways that these two planets can interact. And usually we have sort of a light and a shadow side to each of these blending of energies. So when we talk about Jupiter and Saturn, one of the things I really love is quality over quantity, right? And you can see what's happening is if we blend, Jupiter is all about quantity. It's about more. It's about excess. But Saturn's about limitation. It's about what's of value, what's really important. So it's a nice way, if you can blend these two archetypes, quality over quantity, let's really get the best of what we can out of any situation, right? Shows us the positive side of adversity, right? Whereas here, Jupiter is always a positive attitude. Saturn tends to show us adverse and difficult, challenging situations, but we can see a positive side of adversity. And this is something I talked about, at the conjunction, right? That we had to find a silver lining inside of the coronavirus and the whole pandemic and the lockdowns and the vaccines. And I think we did to an extent. Some of us did. Some of us are still grappling with that. But I think we've come out of the other side. A lot has changed in workplace and, sort of life-work balance. I think it was a big wake-up call for many of us to really find out what is of value, what is important, what is Saturn, and to expand on the quality over the quantity. Maybe less work, more enjoying time with the family, with friends, doing things we enjoy, right? Realistic aspirations, another great quality, right? Jupiter is a very aspiring, aspirational energy, right? But Saturn is going to ground us in what is real, what is practical, what is actually attainable, right? Less is more. Great time to really downsize. You can see how these, right, the two energies interact and blend in, I think, productive, powerful, mature and balanced ways. That's the ideal blending of these two archetypes. But of course, they always can, constellate a shadow side, right? And what is the worst possible combinations, right? Constriction and contraction, right? Where that Saturn just squeezes the life out of the Jupiter enthusiasm. Cutbacks and losses. And this is something I'm really paying attention to. A lot of these cycles tend to trigger some of the economic cycles. I'd be looking very closely at the stock market, things like that, the economy. What's going on in Japan's economy right now is very interesting. It could be a harbinger of things to come. So something to watch out, especially if you are in the markets and that's kind of your world. Just a note of caution there. Missed opportunities. We squander the opportunity that Jupiter provides because we're too pessimistic or blinded or fearful, actually, because Saturn's restriction energy doesn't let us embrace the enthusiasm and the opportunities that Jupiter's providing. Contempt and judgment, right? I mean, there is so much of this going on. It feels like in the culture wars, the politics, the rhetoric. It is just, it's gross, really. I don't know what else to say. But there's a lot of contempt in the rhetoric coming from, and a lot of judgment coming from both sides of the aisle and across the political spectrum, around the world. This is not just an American thing. This seems to be a very global, Jupiter global thing. And of course, we're talking about a global cycle here. And I love this feigned righteousness, right? Which we could also call this, in modern parlance, this is what we call virtue signaling. And, there's a shit ton of that going on right now with all the political rhetoric and jockeying for votes and people's attention. So, a good sort of way of looking at, what are you going to emphasize, Because, again, this is hitting us all individually as well as the collective, right? We're all getting this square energy. And it's, it depends on where it is in your chart, too. We'll tell you exactly how this energy is showing up, which is why I always encourage people, know your own chart so you can read these transits for yourself, really get a good idea of what's going on here, right? I know Jupiter, and this conjunction is right in my Sun and Mars in my 7th house in Gemini. So it's a big, important transit for me, right? Pisces is Saturn is moving through my 4th house of home, so I'm looking at the square being really on the square of my axis. You should know where it is on your chart. This is why I want always people to get readings so they know this information. So you can be forewarned and forearmed, as they say. So focusing, what is attracting your attention? Where are these opportunities? Where are you seeing, realistic aspirations? Where can you get more quality over quantity, right? All of these things, and look out for these negative shadow qualities, because those will bite you in the ass in the long run. As usual, I've got the clouds. These haven't changed in 4 years. I built these back in 2020, so they have served me well as I've continued to use them. And it's just, I just love always having this as it's a really stimulating way to really understand, just how complex these archetypes are, right? I mean, we can get it down to these sort of simple one-liners, which I think is very helpful, but there's so many ways these archetypes can blend and express themselves, a myriad of ways. These are all, I think of them as multifaceted jewels, right? The archetypes have so many dimensions and qualities, and you could just go back and forth, like, can we have like a sense of jovial patience, right? Can we be practical about the future, right? Can we have an honorable discipline, right? Can we noble and kind in our judgments of traditions or authority, right? More tolerant of the process. You could go back and forth and find a myriad of expressions, and they're all co-present at once and inviting us to participate, right? The archetypes are an invitation to participate. Right? They always were, and they're ever evolving. And every time we get an opportunity like this to engage on the archetypal level and instantiate that as individuals, this is where we make our own myth, as I like to say. Super powerful, which is why understanding these can really give you such a much richer perspective and picture of what life is, what's going on, these energy patterns that are constantly unfolding and interacting. Why are these things happening? What is the flow? How do I get in that flow, right? And get aligned with what's really going on. So always helpful, I think, to look at these, and you could, take a snapshot or just freeze it and just find it for yourself. Lean into what is it that you're looking for that these archetypes could really help you access. Now we also can then just look at the two planets and in the respective signs. So now Saturn, having moved into Pisces, very different energy than when it began in Aquarius 4 years ago. That was it was in its own sign. In Aquarius, we were really in a very technical, future-oriented. It was very idealistic. It was challenging. It was scientific. We were dealing with, the vaccines and science, and still with the COVID issues. Lots of structure, authoritarianism, issues about, vaccine and passes and stuff like that. When Saturn moved into Pisces back in Pisces season last year, right, in the spring of 2023, palpable shift. I think we were sort of through the woods, and it's been a different Saturn since then. And you can, again, get this sense of what happens when this, strict boundary establishing, structured taskmaster, authoritarian planet drops into the waters of mutable Pisces, where everything is just very wishy-washy. It's emotional and intuitive, soulful and vulnerable. It's vague, right? This is, Saturn has a trouble dealing with Piscean energy. It's not its most effective place to be. And so some of the Saturnian difficulties have taken a back seat. Some of them have gone underwater. Some of them have become much more unconscious. Some of it has sort of morphed into like the fantasy realm, where there's a lot of illusion and delusion, a lot of escapism during this time. I think a lot of people have kind of buried their head in the sand in many ways. A lot of people, though, are turning in a positive way to, building a spiritual discipline. This has been a great time for people to really, reassess their spiritual outlook, their religious outlook, and looking for deeper meaning, right? I think that's what's come out of the period we're in. So if there's a plus side to Saturn and Pisces, it would be, finding a deeper sense of compassion, right? Within, the reality, within, the boundaries of space and time. It doesn't have to be all woo-woo, as they say, right? You can really get some real disciplined spiritual practices, you can do some really some soul healing by being much more practical and approaching it in a very sober and disciplined way, right? I love this word gravitas for Saturn. What Piscean quality can you bring gravitas to? The quality or compassion or kindness or love, right? Really a beautiful expression if they can be fused properly. And then we've got Jupiter in Gemini, bringing its, expansive nature to the sign of the thinker, the sign of Mercury, the sign of social ability and intelligence and communication and, curiosity, very witty, verbal, talkative, sometimes superficial, right? So, this is an interesting way of looking at Jupiter in Gemini as well. So we're combining these two, and now we're saying, okay, here we have square energy. How are we squaring off between this Saturn in Pisces and this Jupiter in Gemini? And what we call it is the crisis in action, okay? We think about that. What was begun 4 years ago is now saying, okay, we had this optimism. There was a new era beginning, Aquarius. It's the birth of a new era. It's a birth of a 200-year cycle. Technology and, the sort of the community of man or humanity, those Aquarian sort of egalitarian, progressive, bottom-up, grassroots, everybody's a winner. We're taking down the old hierarchy. How are we doing on that? And so here's our check-in. Here's our gut check. Right? And there's a lot of challenges going on. Now, it's not just these two planets, right? Because what we have, as we looked at with the chart, we not only have, Saturn squared Jupiter at this critical junction in the cycle, that Jupiter also is conjoined Mars. So it's adding its Martian aggressive energy to this Jupiter desire to expand, to really, in this Gemini way, right? Which is why the, Gemini rules communication. It rules the media, right? It's a media frickin' circus right now, and it's not going to end. It's going to actually exacerbate over the next couple weeks, if you can believe that. So what do we get when we combine Mars and Jupiter? Same way, right? Two energies that, when combined, incredibly, incredibly powerful, exuberant energy, right? Wholesome confidence, right? Bringing the qualities and the virtues of Jupiter to that confident energy of Mars. Fortunate actions, great accomplishments. A lot can get done with this energy. Positive synergy. So again, what are the areas of your life where these kinds of things can be constellated, where you can lean into them to get access to this energy and really give yourself a boost, particularly anywhere, where is Gemini in your chart? I know for me, it's my seventh house of relationships. So I'm looking into exuberant energy and positive synergy in all of my relationships. I can use this energy to my own positive effect. What am I looking out for in my relationships? And whatever house you have, well, we're looking out for self-aggrandizement. We're looking for obnoxious theatrics. Boy, are we going to see a lot of that obnoxious theatrics in the media circus coming up. I can tell you that, right? Philosophical extremism, right? There's a lot of rhetoric floating around on all sides, coming from all corners of the world. This is Mars, Jupiter, Gemini, right? Waste and excess, nationalism and expansionism, right? And this is, kind of a concern with all that's going on geopolitically. This is one of those sort of tinderbox types of aspects and transits where it can just trigger aggression. Anytime Mars is involved, now it's adding its fuel to this rather tense square between Jupiter and Saturn. What's gonna bust? What's gonna break? There's lots of tensions in lots of places between the two wars, the political unrest, the cultural unrest. It's just really a delicate time. So that's what we're trying to comprehend, trying to grasp what's going on with it. So Mars, Jupiter, right? So again, there's many ways this can present itself, right? And you can just go back and forth about, what are we using this physical, competitive, assertive nature for? Can we use it to be more knowledgeable? Can we bring a hopeful future, right? Can we seek the truth in a much more desirable or tolerant way? Or are we going to be hedonistic and self-indulgent, right? Are we going to be crude and headstrong, as we, overdo it? We get overindulgent, right? We proselytize with too much aggression, right? We can certainly see that kind of energy potentiated here with this configuration. And of course, you see them all in Gemini, and then you say, okay, where's it going to show up, all of that? Well, it's going to show up in all these Geminian type environments, in our communication, so it's, again, it's the media, of course. It's what you're hearing, but it's how we're communicating. It's how our thought processes, our mentality is going to be triggered by this. It's going to show up in us. It's going to show up in our relationships. It's going to show up in our families and our friends and our communities. It's going to show up at the workplace. Again, know it's coming. Navigate this, right? Lean into the light. Avoid the shadows if you can, because you just don't want to get caught up in, these verbal battles, these, the bullshit, if you will. There's a lot of bullshit coming your way in the next couple weeks in all of your environments, so be forewarned. That's kind of, the major thrust of this transit. But of course, it's involving, Saturn here, and then we've got Mars and Jupiter, and what else is making up this big mutable cross? Well, we also have Venus over here in Virgo, and we've got the moon coming in through Sag. Now, these are much faster moving. This is only in effect for this day, right? The moon will move within hours. This square breaks down. But, it's an interesting sort of inflection point where all of this, it's very yang, expressive, masculine type energy from this side of the square is really getting and needing a yin balanced feminine polarity to all of this energy, right? We would love Venus to get some more compassion and understanding from this Sagittarius moon, right? Philosophical. Can it add a touch of high-mindedness to all of the bullshit and chatter going on in this Gemini section of the sky, right? Those two things are in opposition. So that moon, maybe it brings in something that's a little more high-minded. Or it just goes full Jupiterian, right? And it just the bullshit goes through the roof. Hard to tell. Both could happen, right? You've got Saturn opposing. This is a wider opposition here. It's going to move into a very tight opposition, though, as Venus makes its way through the sign over the next couple weeks. So this can be challenging to our relationships, right? As Venus goes through Virgo, we're trying to perfect here. We're trying to improve all of our relationships, improve what we value, our relationship to people, our relationship to things, our relationship to our work, our relationship to social media, everything. You want to start to create healthier routines, right? Anytime a planet moves through Virgo, it's a chance to really clean up your house, clean your room, right? Clean up your, what you're attracted to and what you're attracting. Get clear on it. But with Saturn coming through and opposing it from Pisces over here, we could be very deluded. We could get some restrictions and some difficulties and some setbacks and some suffering in our relationships. Particularly, the Pisces-Virgo axis is always fraught with difficulty. There's a lot of martyrdom and a sort of sadomasochistic energy that can always be constellated here. So again, just a note of caution when it comes to all this stuff. Again, forewarned is forearmed. And this is going to be, in effect for, the next week or so. It's like that square is going to be very long lasting. As Saturn is retrograding, Jupiter and Mars still moving forward, this square energy it's going to last for the rest of this year in many ways. One other thing we could take a look at, as we have been introducing human design and just adding one more perspective, we could see what is this, what can we learn about from human design, where we're getting this Mars-Jupiter conjunction in Gemini. Here it's showing up in gate 35, the gate of change. This desire, this for something new to emerge. What is the new thing that is going to be provoked by the conflict and the crisis that the 36 provides, right? We've got Saturn in the 22. It's an openness, right? An openness to something positive, right? It wants to share, it wants to relate, right? That Pisces energy, it gives us a different sort of qualitative understanding of this Pisces energy, right? So we could look at that differently. We could look at just those two gates, and certainly that 35th gate with this combination of Mars and Jupiter. They're both in line 35-6. So this is just a great way. Again, this is how I like to start using both of these together. Let's get a keynote for this conjunction and for this square at this time, right? So this idea of rectification, right? What we're talking about, we're in the gate of change, a hunger for something new, a sense that something needs to change, new things need to happen. We're bored of the same old, right? Business as usual, politics as usual, war as usual, same old bullshit. We're hungry for a change. How does it manifest in this sixth line, right? The highest manifestation in many ways of this gate, rectification. The process of crystallization coupled with ambition that assures timely and effective correction. Progressive change that results from correction, right? So this gives us insight. This is a time for course correction, right? Positive insights that correctly applied, we have to rectify the situation so that we can initiate the change that we all know we need and want to see in the world. And it starts inside right here with all of us. What do we need to rectify in our own desire to change? What do we need to, crystallize, right? This is Saturn exalted on the other side of this square, right? So then let's go back. What is this Saturn in the 22, right? The gate of openness, called grace in the I Ching. Beautiful gate, right? Open to hearing the wishes of the community. Moody, but social. You're either going to be social or you're going to withdraw. And we see that Saturn here is in the gate of line 1, second class ticket, right? The ability to accept and enjoy a subordinate position, the emotional awareness to enjoy a social subordinate position. But again, that's just a quick, brief way I can show you of how we can use both of these systems in ways that are, I think, the synergy and the integration is really, really powerful because they're both pointing us to the same thing. Astrology gives us, as I say, the blueprint and the map. And I feel like the human design is like the GPS. It's like the Google Maps. It's giving us turn-by-turn directions to navigate through this with a lot of clarity. So I'll just leave you with these images and this concept of Saturn and Jupiter, war and peace in the global village. As I was working on these images, is it a showdown? Is this conflict, is this crisis in action going to be all about war and fighting politically and fighting economically and fighting physically on the battlefields, right? Or is it going to be about peace and cooperation, right? Because ideally, these two energies, Saturn and Jupiter, want to work together in harmony for the betterment of society. That's the idealized way that we work this energy. Wouldn't it be great if the whole world operated by this sort of mindset, this understanding of what's actually going on, what is being constellated and called into being by the proper marriage of these two archetypes, these two energies, this pattern in the sky that is unfolding. Because that's what we want. We want more peace, less war in this global village. All right, that's my 2 cents. I hope that was insightful or interesting, something that you have a takeaway from. As usual, if you did enjoy it, you liked it, of course, click the like button, subscribe, all that stuff. I'm trying to, share this information, grow the channel. It's growing little by little. It's amazing. It's been 4 years almost. Yeah, good luck navigating it. I hope things go well. I hope there is nothing too crisis-oriented that comes our way this week, but just move into this next week with a heightened awareness to all of these energies that are co-present, and try to navigate them to your best ability. All right, till next time, everyone. Sat Nam.